I want to talk a little bit about what happened on taxes and then where we go from here, because the tax thing was a big deal. It was one of the top two singular victories. The first was getting a Supreme Court justice over, so we have 5-4 on most issues, not all, but most issues. We have a 5-4 more conservative court. That was Mitch McConnell's contribution to Western civilization. He didn't let the Democrats have it, and there was a tremendous amount of pressure, and I talked to some of the senators who didn't think they were going to be able to stand up to the pressure of not nominating, and they were able to do that. So he kept it open, and then Trump was not only able to put someone there, but had the wisdom to look at the Federalist Society, which is one of the structures built during the Reagan years. And I think one of the tremendous successes, if anyone's going into become a lawyer or go to law school, join the Federalist Society at your university, because when they want to make you a judge, they'll ask whether you're a member, and you want to be able to say yes. And that has really given us a network and a capacity to think about federal judges that we simply didn't have before it was created. And that was the handwork of a handful of people who put it together and have continued to run it. Taxes. Supreme Court judge, big. Taxes, big. We got a very significant tax cut and tax reform. And it's difficult. Some people say tax cut. The president says tax cut. Some people say tax reform. And it's that wonderful Saturday Night Live routine where they're trying to decide whether it's a dessert topping or a floor wax. Okay. And then the guy comes in and says, well, it's a dessert topping and a floor wax. It does both. Well, it was tax reform and a tax cut because it reduced taxes $1.5 trillion from what one would have otherwise, if you hadn't done anything, from what we expected the government to take over the next 10 years. But it also changed the structure on taxes. We took the corporate rate, which was 35%, and everybody agreed it was too high. It was the highest in the world. Japan used to be stupider than us, and then they came down from 40 down to 30. They decided we could be stupidest, and we were stuck at 35. Matter of fact, when we put 34 in under Reagan, the 1986 Tax Reform Act under Reagan, that was one of the lower in the world, okay? And the whole rest of the world goes, oh my goodness, that's pretty impressive. And then they shoot past us and down to where Ireland's 12.5. Canada, for crying out loud, is in the teens. Britain's in the teens. Socialist China is at 25. We're at 35. European average, low 20s. We took it down to 21. One of the biggest successes of the Trump candidacy was when the Republicans in the House were planning to have a tax bill to be ready to run on and hopefully have a Republican president to sign it, and they were at 25. They could see getting to 25, and it's not easy to do because to make it permanent, it has to be revenue neutral from years 11 to 50, which means you have to have all these offsets. Getting to 25 was really a lot of work, and Trump said on the campaign, when he was winning, he wasn't the nominee yet, but he was winning, gerund, he said 15. So that's when Ryan took it to 20. And they agreed they'd hold to 20, and they pretty much held to 20. They bopped to 21 because at the end, it has to fit in, not has to fit into this box of not your own making, but Bob Corker's making of the 1.5 trillion, no more than that. But you also have CBO and joint tax scoring it. So you have make-believe scoring a non-make-believe, a legally make-believe but enforceable amount of the box, size of the box you can put it in. So trying to put that in, anyway, 21. But 35 down to 21 changed the world. We also went from a worldwide tax system to a territorial tax system. What we used to do is we taxed every American business, regardless of where they earn money. If you had a factory in France and you made a lot of money, you pay French taxes, and if you brought the money back, you also paid American taxes. Okay? So one of the things people would do is they'd leave the money in France, and after a while they go, well, we could build another factory here, or in Japan, or some other country. It was a crazy, stupid policy. It was destructive, and all during his presidency, Obama told the guys out in Silicon Valley, I want to fix that. I realize that's crazy. And they talked about bringing it down. But what he wanted in return for taking the top rate from 35 down to, something crazy like 28, and it wasn't much of a cut that he was looking for, was a $1.4 trillion net tax increase. That's what he had to have. When you wonder why things don't happen in this town, because, well, they're good ideas. Everyone agrees it's a good idea. Good ideas are known as hostages, okay? Everybody agrees. And Obama knew how much people wanted that 35% rate down. He knew companies were being bought by other companies. They were inverting and moving their corporate headquarters overseas. And then he sat there and played politics and called them names like it was their fault. They were driven out of the country by our tax policy, our government's tax policy. He acted, remember Benedict Arnold corporations, right? Companies that can't take it anymore. By the way, it's not your choice. Other people can buy you, and then you're not there anymore. So it's not like you say, well, I think we'll stay here. Well, no, you won't, not if the stockholders aren't willing to put up with that nonsense. But Obama said, wow, you really want this. And so he attached a boat anchor to the cut. And the boat anchor was so big, the tax, how do you have a net tax increase of $1.4 trillion over a decade and have it help the economy? Okay, you're going to take the rates down, but you're going to do all this other damaging stuff. So what we were able to do this time, and the other great thing about taking those rates down is they were always the Democrats would say to the Democrats, we'll give you this for something else. Every time we pass one of those easy bills, everybody agrees on that. That's not so impressive that we passed this, that, or the other thing. Every time you pass something that everybody agrees on, you free one of the hostages. You'll never have to pay to give this. The Democrats hate passing some of this stuff that they're agreeing to. Banking, less banking regulation on Dodd-Frank for smaller banks and so on. They wanted to sell that for something else, and they just had to give it away for nothing. And it just drives them nuts. So the corporate rate, tremendous pro-growth policy, several $1 trillion will flow in from overseas, American corporate earnings from overseas. And you saw the big announcement when Apple announced how much money they were bringing into the United States as a result. But in addition, money from people in Brazil and Canada and Germany is flowing into the United States and will continue to flow into the United States because we're a better deal. You make more money investing in an American company today than you did 5 months ago because the rate that what the government takes is not 35%, but only 21%. So it's a significant increase in the return to investment. Add to that, we went to full business expensing, which means and this is why the airplane industry is doing so well, because they're very expensive and heavy capital intensive. I just talked to the governor of Kansas. They make a whole bunch of the middles of the planes, and then they put them on railroad cars and send them to Seattle to stick the tail and the front on. But the middle, that's made in Kansas. And there are a lot of orders in because you can immediately expense all business investment, not depreciate over 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but you expense it in year one, and you'd rather have the dollar today, or rather have $10 deduction today than $1 over 10 years, okay? The Catholic Church in the Middle Ages and the Muslims today don't get the time value of money. However, it does matter, it really does, and not just for Protestants. So taking the long depreciation schedules and making the depreciation not over many years, but in 1 year, lowers the cost of capital and is some people think that's as big a deal in terms of economic growth as the rate reduction at the corporate side. 90% of Americans got a rate reduction, got a tax cut, period, but everybody, 100% got a rate reduction, 90% get a tax cut, and we do a series of other reforms. We opened ANWR, the place to drill up in Alaska, expected to be the same size as Prudhoe Bay, and Alaska's been driving on Prudhoe Bay for 40 years. But it's beginning to run out. And if we don't drill in Alaska, they will go Democrat. Alaska is the one state I worry about flipping from strong red to completely blue if we don't allow them to continue to open up areas for exploration, because while they think they're Republicans because they go to church from time to time and they have a gun, they all work for the government up there. And so, and it's like Qatar or Kuwait or something. It's all very great. Everyone's very wealthy, and they all work for the government. But you can afford to do that if you're Norway or Qatar or Kuwait or Alaska and you have all this oil. But oil runs out, then they'll start either eating each other or drilling, not in Anwar, but in the federal budget. And we don't want them drilling in the federal budget. So that was a twofer. We not only got a cheerful vote from the lady senator up there who was very, see what I did? Anwar, look at me, Anwar. She's very happy and was telling everyone. There was never a discussion during tax reform. I wonder if the Democrats will get hurt. Remember, she was one of the 3 people who didn't vote for reforming health care. But nobody ever wondered about the other. So, and there was no reason for them to. That was all set early on. So there was, and also we eliminated the deductibility of SALT, state and local taxes. When the federal government, I keep saying we when I mean the federal government, when they, those guys, the people with guns who take your money, when the federal government taxes you, it used to allow people to deduct all their state and local taxes. So if you were a corrupt big city mayor or an incompetent governor and you had all these income taxes and property taxes, you could look at your rich donors and say, you're not paying for the whole thing, you get to deduct it, right? That's the way lousy charities say, you should give us money. We don't do anything interesting, but it's tax deductible. You should do that. It's less expensive. Why you buy things that are 50% off, even that they're never going to go for 100. Anyway, everything's 50% off. Well, tax deductibility is the 50% off sign on stupid government programs. And so people, oh, okay, and they buy this. Well, we took away that subsidy of corrupt city mayors and incompetent governors and said, you know what, you're going to have to face people and say, this is how much you're paying, and better explain to them why it's worthwhile, why it's a good idea. Because it's not 50% off. It's not discounted. It's not tax deductible. Now you get $10,000, which is what we needed to buy a number of states, because there's many states have nobody who pays more than $10,000 in state and local taxes. And so then they were all happy, and there are a handful of people in New York who were unhappy. I don't know if you saw recently in the papers, the value of large condo apartments in New York of more than $4 million have dropped 10%. And sales of all property, high-end properties, dropped a quarter, okay? So this stuff wasn't worth what they were selling it for, and it is having this impact. Now, the Democrat position used to be you should be mad at the Republican Congress, and our position is talk to your mayor. He's the one stealing your money. Talk to your governor. And it's causing no end of problems because the old Democrat position of we're just going to tax rich people, and then you tell you the rich people, I got you a special discount on your taxes, isn't working as well as it used to. And we are moving towards where you may get a lot of those high-income states willing to move towards a single rate, flat rate tax because they're just not getting what they wanted to out of progressive taxation. The Japanese government asked me over a couple weeks after the tax bill passed, and I spent a week talking to all these government people about what the tax bill means, and then they spent a lot of time telling me what they thought it meant. And they had 2 insights, and of the 15 people I talked to, 7 of them were working off a script. They all said the exact same thing. One, they thought, and the higher up, and the later in the week, when you'd have the early meetings and they'd call ahead, yeah, you do want to meet this guy. So all of a sudden, my empty end of the week turned into the full end of the week, and the quality of the guys you're meeting with jumps up too. But their comment was twofold. They believed that we put ourselves back on the playing field with this tax cut, that this was going to be so powerful for the American economy, that it is Reagan-esque, and that the United States is coming back as an economic power when it was perceived to have a certain amount of decline, at least compared to China. The second comment was, and again, half of these guys said this unprompted. They said, we have 30 years, and if China doesn't eat us in 30 years, if China doesn't become the hegemon in Asia in 30 years, if China doesn't push you out of Asia, and I don't mean invade everybody, but the Corinthian deal that Philip of Macedon set up, which you guys can run yourself, just I run you, so it'll be fun. And so technically everybody's independent, but not necessarily. And they said China's demographic problems, and Japan has demographic problems too. They largely forgot to have kids. But the difference between Japan and China is they not only forgot to have kids, but when they did remember, they made sure it was a guy and not a girl, which makes changing the demographic direction tougher. You can't go, okay, everybody, now we got to have 3 kids, and the guy's going, I'm not sure this will work. So they got old. They now have a declining workforce in China. Okay, the number of people between 25 and 60 is going down. What are you talking about? There are billions and billions of people. Yeah, there are billions and billions of people. A lot of them are 72. Okay, and they're getting older and they're not necessarily working, and then you've got fewer young people and fewer guys in the middle, and over time, that decline puts China in a very difficult position financially, and also in terms of having a workforce. When I was in Japan maybe 10, 15 years ago, the only thing they would talk about was that Three Gorges Dam. The Three Gorges Dam, I knew the environmentalists didn't like it because it irritated fish or something, or polar bears, I guess. The dam set up a long canal 200 miles into the center of China, and you can now run barges up and down it. So they added 200 million people to their workforce. It's as if they lived in Shanghai next to the port, because they do live next to a port. There's a very long port. And Japan goes, they're adding 2 Japans to the Chinese workforce. We're just completely screwed. I don't know how we're going to work with it. These people have been eating cabbages all their life, and now they're going to get 2 cabbages and work 8 hours a day, and how do we compete with this? The concern about China on Japan's part was, in their view, a limited window. It's still dangerous, North Korea, China, all that stuff. But there's a window, then they think that what we did on taxes gets them past that. Good news on taxes. There are 4 ways to measure it. Step 1, 90% of the American people, this is IRS numbers, 90% of the American people are paying less taxes than they did before the tax cut took place on January 1st. And about 6% of the people pay more. A lot of those people are higher income, and their wealth has gone up a bunch. So the fact that they are paying a little bit more until they reorganize their asset base and decide where they're going to invest, this is a fixable problem for them. And the fact that their assets are doing better helps overcome that. But 90% clear pay increase. A tax cut is a pay increase. And I would urge all of you, whenever you talk to folks about the tax cut, remind people that a tax cut is a pay increase. A tax cut increases your take-home pay. As much as if your employer said, here's more money. What happened is the government said, we're going to take less money, your take-home pay goes up. A tax cut is a pay increase. And when Democrats raise taxes, it is a pay cut. Every Democrat voted for the Obama pay cuts, the pay cuts that Obama passed, the pay cuts that the governor of Virginia is pushing through, the pay cuts that the mayor of New York is trying to get through. Some people who don't quite get taxes do get pay cuts and pay increases. So 90% are seeing more take-home pay. Now, a number of those people, polls tell us, don't quite get it, and my guess is that they do what I do, is they get direct deposit into their bank. And so they don't necessarily look at what the difference is every 2 weeks coming in. So we need to remind people, look at your pay stub, go look at your deposits every couple of weeks into your bank, and notice the difference over 3 months. That's why we're going to have a vote around April 17th. It's not April 15th this year, it's April 17th because of holidays and Sundays and whatnot. But the goal is to once again have the Democrats vote yes or no on the individual part of the tax reform. The corporate part of the tax reform is permanent because you can't ask people, would you please invest several $100 billion? Oh, and by the way, the lower tax is good for 10 years. Then you don't get the investment. It's permanent. Okay, now we can do stuff. But on the individual level, we did it for 10 years, and the reason for that is under the rules of reconciliation, we can't take our $1.5 trillion tax cut out into the future without 60 votes in the Senate. You can't do it with just 51 votes. Now, we'll come back every year that we have the House and Senate and kick it out another 10 years, and eventually we will make it permanent, as we did even under Obama. But this is a very, very important vote in the House, then hopefully in the Senate as well, because we will remind everybody we passed a bill in December. The press doesn't like to talk about it, but they have to at least cover it somewhat. And then we'll have a conversation about how big the tax cut is and what it means to you, and please go look at your thing. And every Republican congressman can say, I just voted for a second time to give you a pay increase by cutting your taxes, and my Democrat opponent or the Democrat incumbent voted no twice. Voted no twice. First time he might have said, well, I didn't like the corporate stuff. This is all individual stuff being made permanent. Yes, no, vote for it. I don't expect them to pass it, but I do think it'll give us a great deal to talk about and remind people of the power of the tax cut. 90% of people got a tax cut. Second, those bonuses. I didn't expect the bonuses. AT&T was the first company to do it. $1,000 bonus for, I think, a couple 100,000 people. There are more than 4 million people who have received bonuses as a result, direct result of the tax cut. If you go to our website, atr.org, at the front of the website, atr.org, we have a list of all companies that have publicly stated they're giving bonuses because of tax cuts. We have about 500 or so on that. It's more than 4 million people, but we keep track of the bonuses, but on there we also list bonuses, pay increases, adoption costs covered by Walmart now, all sorts of more 401k matches and so on, a lot of very interesting things. McDonald's is doing more on training and education support for more of their workers. It's a tremendous series of benefits. Millions of people get it directly. In addition to the 90% who get higher take-home pay, now we're talking about millions of people. And this will keep going on because this happens these people make these earnings announcements on a quarterly basis, and it just keeps going to go around through October, people making these announcements. Third, 50% of the American people are in the stock market. 50% of the American people have a 401k, an IRA, a defined contribution pension. Their life savings they see going up. That's when they're actually more likely to see, because every month you get something, and they tell you, this month is what happened. This year is what happened. That we do much better compared to, and that's clearer even than the tax issue on the take-home pay. And then lastly, if you have a investor-owned utility, like 85% of the utilities in the United States, and you get a federal tax cut, you are required legally to pass that tax cut through because you had been allowed to bill your customers to pay the federal tax, and that was part of your rate base, but now you're not going to pay as big a federal tax, so about $4.5 billion or more in lower utility bills. 91 million people, 91 Americans have been informed that they will be paying lower utility rates. Now that's a note people read. 91 million. And every month, people will be reminded that they're paying less. I was in Florida when Florida Power and Light announced, we just had a big hurricane, and usually after a hurricane, for 2 or 3 years, we raise your rates because we have to go fix everything that got blown down. This year, lots of stuff got blown down, but we're not raising rates because of the Republican tax cut. That's how we're going to pay for it. Okay, so we're not raising rates. We'll just take the revenue from the tax cut and put it into fixing everything, and the Public Utility Commission was happy with that. So these listed benefits are very helpful, and I bring all this up because, as you know, we have very strong headwinds coming at us in this next election. The rule in politics is you want to beat your enemy. You either want to slip past them in the dark of night when they didn't notice what happened, and that's a lot of our deregulation. There's so much, it's so complicated, it's so many different places. The left has a hard time articulating why they're unhappy about deregulation. Also, there's so much of it, it just keeps coming in. They can get vaguely outraged about that, and then vaguely outraged, but what are you supposed to focus on? We left Paris, that was like a week-long news story. Global warming was supposed to end Western civilization. Actually had Al Gore. Well, Al Gore asked to come to the Wednesday meeting, which we do on Wednesday mornings after this meeting, and we had about 120 people at the Times back in 2004. And he thought if he spoke slowly, we'd get it. And he was very confident he could explain this to us. So I said, sure. And I wanted everybody on our team to see the best they had. And I called the 10 people, usually never tell anyone who's on the agenda, because the meeting's the meetings. This is not, seeing interesting people who happen to come through town. I mean, that's nice, but that's not what it's about. I called the 10 people who look in the mirror and say, I fight the global warming hysterics. That's what I do. And I brought them on. I said, sit here, and everybody gets to ask a question, and don't tell anybody that I told you, because we never tell anybody who's on the agenda. But I didn't want one of them to miss the meeting because they were going to the doctor's office. Well, if I'd been there, I'd have, boom, boom, I'd have gotten them. So every one of them got to ask their tough question, and they were all fine questions. But, oddly enough, there wasn't one of them Gore hadn't heard before and couldn't fence. It doesn't mean he was right, they were wrong or anything. It didn't knock him over the way in your fantasies, and when you're in the shower, you go, and then I'll say this, and then I'll go, you're right, I give up. But it didn't happen. But I elicited some information, and that was, I said, look, I remember global cooling was caused by by things, and the fix was to ride bicycles and use less energy and 9 other things. And then it was global warming, and the point was to ride bicycles and use less energy and another list of things. And now it's climate change, and the solution to which is to ride bicycles and use less energy, and the same list of things. Said if the angels came down and sat on your shoulder and said it's not warming, it's not cooling, it's not even changing, are there, and before I finished the question was, are there any of these things you shouldn't require? He said, no, you should do them all anyway. Okay? So the point was there's a list of 10 things they want, and they will take the, cooling, gotta do these 10 things. Warming, gotta do these 10 things. And it's not, climate change, gotta do 10 things. They just have 10 things they want to make us do. And so it doesn't matter to them if we proved there wasn't any global warming. They'd be back, it'd be caused by something else. We'd have to do these 10 things for some other reason. As we move forward, we've done fairly well on deregulation, and I think even keeping it low, and we didn't dance on their graves, and we didn't spit at them and tell them, we won, you lost. We just keep winning quietly. There's no gloating. There was an article in the paper that Rick Perry's doing all this stuff over at Energy, and he's not making any noise, and no one's paying attention. I mean, literally, they were calling in the heavy artillery. The press is a newspaper article. Rick Perry's doing stuff, and nobody's yelling at him. Please start. To let all the other news outlets understand that they were missing something. And I worry now that they're going to target Rick Perry. What's he doing? But Rick Perry's not outgoing. I'm doing this, and even Pruitt's doing massive things, but you never see him on TV. Ha ha ha! I win, you lose. But there is too much of this poking the bear. Okay, on our team, you don't want to irritate the other side. You want to beat them. You can laugh at them later. You can go, when they're dead, you can poke them. But not between now and an election. And because there's been all this unnecessary poking for no purpose at all, the other team is very riled up, and everyone says they're excited. It is the counter to the Tea Party rallies. They're doing rallies just like we did. Once you do a rally, you tell all your friends about it. It's a big cool thing you did this year. And it becomes a big thing, and it becomes part of your life, and all of a sudden you're political, even if you weren't before. It's very, very dangerous. So we have a lot of work to do, and we need to have the tax cut really kick in and focused on, and we need the economic growth from the deregulation and to make the case, and we need our candidates to work. I went to an event with Barbara Comstock yesterday morning, and she walked through what she's doing. She is everywhere. She has walked the district. There isn't a Korean festival she isn't at. She was at the Hindu festival in between Good Friday and Easter. There were a series of Hindu temples in her district. She hits everything. She is everywhere. And she is walking that district. She pulled 20 points ahead of Trump because she knows people. She works with people. She knows every community in the place. She's at the Adams Mosque every time they've got something special. She's out there. And the way the left is running is their position isn't Republicans hate fill-in-the-blank minority. I'm sorry, their position isn't you should hate Republicans. It's Republicans hate you. Republicans hate you. That's their sales pitch. That's why showing up is 80%, quoting the great Republican thinker Woody Allen, showing up is 80% of life. If you show up at various communities, in their churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, if you show up at their events, if you eat the very interesting food that some of them have come up with, if at 11 o'clock at night you do go to the temple and get blessed because, as the head Hindu guy there says, everybody at blessed wins. And so you go, so you be there, so you chat, you know. You don't have to have some 10-point checklist. I don't want your support unless you are focused on these 10 things. I like you. I respect you. I'm here. I showed up. And that blows away more than half of the left's argument. Because if we don't hate them, well, you told me they hated me. And they came and they said, hi, they're very pleasant, you know. And they don't hate me. So what was your other argument? The great schools you run for me? Is that it? You know, how the welfare state's been helpful or something? Or, you know, what is it that you're doing for me other than protecting me from these people who hate me? So this showing at Kaufman, a week ago, I went out to a fundraiser for Kaufman, Colorado. He is in a district plus 12 for Hillary. He's running, he won by 9 points. He's running 6 points ahead this time against his Democratic opponents. He has learned Spanish. They moved his district in to be more heavily Hispanic, to be Hispanic at all from where it was. He's learned Spanish. He goes to all the Ethiopian events. He goes to everything. He works that district. He's going to win that district. And the future of who we want is hardcore people who are willing to work. We have a series of Republicans who sit in 70% Republican districts, and their view is, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do voter turnout to help Senate candidates and governor candidates and president candidates, because I get across the finish line simply by the fact that I've got a 70% district. And these things are black holes. Nothing happens in there. And we lose Senate races, and we lose governor's races because our congressmen are not, well, why should I get, I don't need 20%, but you don't need a 20% win, but the Republican governor who's getting killed in a city needs your district to be 20% for him and have the turnout. It needs to be more than 20%. Get everybody out. And those Republican congressmen that are doing that, Emmer is the congressman from Minnesota. He articulates this exactly. When he came to talk to me, he said, I'm not going to raise taxes. He takes the pledge. Got it. You know, he's good on taxes and stuff. And I can steal people's guns. I like babies. Okay. Now, and babies' guns, too. So, should never be taxed. But he said, I want to come to Congress to elect senators and governors. And he walked through how. And the person he replaced never did that. Spent her time on Fox TV, which is interesting. But, you know, Fox TV can find other blondes to give the same talking points. If you're a congressman or a senator, work your district. Turn out the vote. Elect yourself by bunches. But that's not the point. The point is governors, senators, presidents. We almost won with Minnesota this last time. We need our congressmen driving up the votes in solid red districts. Thank you so much, Morton. Thank you for your leadership and the Leadership Institute.